Welcome, parents. Thank you for being here. We're going to give a couple of minutes for additional participants to enter our the Zoom platform for Parent Information Night. So hang tight, and we'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes. Again, welcome to those of you who are joining in. We are allowing for a couple of minutes for additional participants to join the Zoom platform, and we'll get started here in about 1 minute. You can see on the screen the presentation title, so you know you're in the right place. And thank you for attending. For those who are looking for the live stream on YouTube, we're having some issue with permissions to live stream. So we are recording this, and we will post it as soon as possible on YouTube, where it can be viewed with closed captioning in your preferred language. Okay. We've got 5:32, so we're just going to go ahead and get started with some introductions, and I think we might have a few more folks joining us as we go. So thank you. Welcome again. This is our EdTech Parent Information Night series, and tonight's presentation is all about supporting our students, preparing your children for state testing, also known as CAASPP testing. The team that's presenting to you tonight is myself. I'm Janae Enna. Hello, and I'm the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. We also have our EdTech specialist team. So Steve Harmon is the specialist for the Burnell learning community. Bruce Neff is here, the EdTech specialist for the Davis learning community, and Sergio Rizzi is the specialist for the Herman learning community. So each of them will be presenting as well as myself tonight. You can access, if you have a phone, you can use the QR code that's on all of our slides to pull up the presentation. There's also a link there at the bottom where you can have access to the presentation now and later for future use. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the CAASPP system is. This is our state testing system, and there's kind of two branches of it. One is CAASPP, you see the visual for that here, and the other one is the LPAC, and that acronym is referring to the assessment that our English learners take annually. So that's in addition to what you see here. If your child is an English learner, then they'll also be taking the LPAC, but tonight we're here to talk about preparing for CAASPP. So this is specifically focused on the science test, and the science test is given at 5th and 8th grade. And then our language arts test, English language arts, and math, and those are also known as the Smarter Balance tests. And for students with special needs, the English language arts and math also come in the form of the alternative assessment. So some of our students will be taking that. And for students in dual immersion, at some of our sites are taking the Spanish reading language arts assessment. So that's kind of the system and the umbrella of what falls under this. And so your students will be taking at minimum the language arts and the math, which have two parts to them. The parts are the performance task, which is the longer form writing, and then the computer adapted test. And so each language arts and math has those two parts. So we're going to go to the next slide and get a little bit more information. Why are we preparing for the CAASPP? You know, why are we spending some time to prepare for it? Well, your children have either not ever seen the state test, or it's been 3 years. So if you're a parent thinking, I feel so out of the loop. I don't really recall state testing. I don't really remember what it looks like. That's why you're here. You want to see a little bit more, get a little bit more information. You're not alone. It is practically new information for all of us because it's been so long, and that is due to our school closures and the state pausing state testing for the last 2 years. So about half of our students at testing grade levels will have never seen the test, and the other half, it's been 3 years. And so we really want to give them the best opportunity to be prepared, to understand what's coming on the test, and to use the technology well. The other reason why it's important for us to be prepared is because our state accountability system uses state testing as one of the indicators for accountability. So that accountability system is called the California Dashboard. That's a whole other webinar topic, but the dashboard has various indicators that kind of measure how our school district is doing. And so if you'll see on the next, go ahead and it'd be up to the next slide. For this school year, because we haven't had indicators for the last couple of years for language arts and math, this school year will be kind of a baseline year, and we won't see growth and change. We won't see the growth from previous years. We're only going to see a status. And so that's kind of new. It'll be the first in the 3 years of a new growth model that the state has developed for its dashboard and indicators. So that's a little bit different for this year. And some other things that are new for this year is that the testing window doesn't open until April 4th in our district, and we pushed that date back a little bit just to give some time to prepare. But also, and you'll get, as a parent, you'll get your child's school or class testing schedule from your child's principal. Communication will come from the school or from the teacher. So you know when they're taking the various tests that they have to take. But what you'll see this year is that our testing timeframes are collapsed a little bit. So they're closer together, or they won't be spread out as much because we have one-to-one devices. So they don't have to share their Chromebooks for testing, meaning that we don't have to stagger the schedule so much, and we can test in a time frame that's a little bit more conducive to the student's schedule. So that's kind of a nice thing. We have a little bit more time to prepare for that, but also something else that's new is that I mentioned that there was the CAT test and there was the performance task. So the computer adaptive test last year, when the state developed remote testing, they adjusted the number of questions that were on the CAT portion, and they called it the short form assessment. And so there's more like just 20 questions on that. Some of them are multiple choice and some of them are constructed response, but they kept that for this year, the short form. So our Virtual Learning Academy students are taking the remote test, but even students who are in person have the ability to do the short form assessment instead of the longer form. So that test time for the CAT portion of the assessment, the estimated testing time is about 45 minutes. So that kind of reduces a little bit of the length of time students are spending in front of their assessment. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what our task is and what we aim to do here is to provide and develop the best conditions for students to be successful and to do their best and to feel confident. And so at the school sites and hopefully in the home, we'll be able to give them what they need to feel confident going into state testing. Next slide. So there's a few different ways that we're practicing, and of course, we want students to be prepared with all of the content knowledge that they need going into any kind of assessment, and that's a given. But we also, like I mentioned before, that we want them to be comfortable with the item types and the technology that they're using. It's not just a straight pencil and paper. There's some different things that they're going to need to know and do on the assessment. So there's 3 different ways for students to access that. And we're going to kind of skip over the training test because that's more for students and teachers to use, and we've kind of passed that point. So at home, or even in the classroom, but at home, we can access what the test looks like and test questions through the practice tests. These are grade level specific. The answers are not recorded and it's not scored, but you do get practice. The student does get practice, and it doesn't require a secure browser. So you can use it as a guest user in the guest portal, and the link is there, but our EdTech specialists are going to walk through exactly how to access that and what it looks like a little bit later. I mentioned the training tests are also kind of available. They're available to, to teachers and students, but what they're more using now is called interim testing. And so there's two different types. There's an interim assessment that really mirrors the summative assessment, and students could go through the whole test, or there's interim block assessments, which are just like shorter, 6 to 8 questions, giving them an opportunity to practice logging on and getting the teachers to get the session started, and then practice with the technology in a shorter amount of time. So they don't have to, we don't want to over-assess and overwhelm students with these full length tests. So we're giving them interim assessments to get them familiar and to get them comfortable. But with those, teachers do get scores. So we can get a little bit of feedback to see how did students do, and kind of practice and prepare on specific standards as well. So students and parents cannot do that at home. You have to be a test administrator in order to administer that. And so that's for the students and teachers to use. They're secure as well. They go through the secure browser. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it on to get a little bit more details about what resources there are for parents and what you can do at home.
Thanks, Janae. So as you see here, one of the resources that we'll take a little bit of a deep dive into is a resource from the state called Starting Smarter. And I'm going to go ahead and share that screen of that browser. And hopefully everybody can see that. So this is the website, the Starting Smarter website from the state, and it does have some resources that could be beneficial to review prior to testing. It does tell you a little bit about how the score reports will be delivered and what the substandards are. But the one thing I really do like is just to get an idea before you do practice tests of what type of questions may be on the test. So there's some sample test questions here. And what you can do is basically select the main subject. So if you're looking for like a language arts sample question, you can select the grade level, and then you can select one of the substandards in which are being addressed during the test. And so to give yourself basically an idea of what does a question that is going to be addressing the listening skill or the reading skill or the writing or research skill, you can kind of click around in there, and then when you hit submit, it will give you an idea of what that question will look like, or questions will look like, with some samples similar to the practice test. However, it's not in the format that the actual test is in. So this is more just like a quick way of seeing what types of questions are being asked to address specific subject matter of the standard. And then you can answer the quick question, and then it'll show you the answer if you got it right or not. So there's 3 in this example here for language arts in grade 4, addressing the listening skill. And then if you'd like to read or look more about the reading skill, you can click submit there, and then same idea, it gives you a little breakdown and then some sample questions. You can read the full passage by clicking on that. It pops up the full passage that the student would read before answering the question or looking for context clues or anything like that, and then answering the question, and then you'll see basically what the correct answer was looking for. And that goes to cover all of the subjects that are tested in the grade levels that they're tested in. So For example, if you select science, you're only going to see the 2 grades that are tested in science in our district, along with the actual substandard for that. So I think this is a pretty neat resource because it gives you some questions that are relevant to, well, how should I prepare, or how should I study, or where do I feel like I need to work on more? Because you'll kind of see a question that is directly related to one of the standards that is being assessed on the test. And then below that section is some additional resources that the state has provided. And then there's an additional link to the practice test, which Bruce will be talking about in a few moments. So hopefully this is a link that you're able to bookmark, or at least get a chance to write down. It is ca.startingsmarter.org. And I think it's a great resource to spend some time on with your child.
Steve, if you don't mind going back to the deck, I can begin to discuss how they can access the practice test. Thank you. So yeah, so basically, I would encourage you, the teachers in the classrooms are absolutely encouraging their students as well to kind of just get familiar really with the tools. It's not so much that you are don't be overly concerned about the content and how they're going to answer the questions, because like I said, or Ms. Anna had said that it's been a while since we've done this. So I think that just the overall theme is, doing your best. And one of the things we don't want to get in their way of being able to see how they're doing is how they can utilize the actual tools to demonstrate their knowledge. So I'm going to be kind of going through this a little bit with you. If there were anything that I would recommend, spend a little bit of time, just sit down for a little bit and have your kiddos just go through the practice test, and maybe even specifically looking at how they understand the tools that they can use to support the process. So I'm going to emphasize a bit on that. So ways that you can get there. I know if you're in this presentation here, if it's recorded, we do have links. And if you look at the QR code or go to the tiny URL that's there, you could eventually get to this link. You can also Google it. But probably the easiest way to get at it, and is also good practice, is to have the students just get their Chromebooks out, because this is the device they will be testing on in their environment. So even if they have something a setup at home that they're used to doing, I would strongly encourage them to do any practicing on the device they'll be using in the setting. So that will be, in the greatest majority of students, will be with a district provided Chromebook. So get that thing charged up, ready to go. When they open up the Chromebook, you could go to the practice set by test by Googling it, finding a link, this presentation. There's a lot of steps to do that. During the actual test, when you do the CAASPP testing, you notice I kind of have 2 blurry images. I apologize for that. Those were taken with my phone, because before you actually type in your password to get into your Chromebook and get to your personal stuff, this is where what's called the secure test browser lives. The reason why it's here is because, for the purpose of the state testing, they can't allow any applications, extensions, content that the student would have access to on their login to assist them during the actual test. So to get around that, they create this little secure browser, which is currently on every student Chromebook. So when they open up the lid, if you look near on the bottom left, that's that screenshot there. Sorry, it's kind of hidden, but just to the right of shutdown, there's a thing that's called apps. When they click on the apps, it's going to pop open and you're going to see Secure Test Browser. Once you click on that, then this is exactly what the students will do on the day of their testing when they do the official test. So it kind of feels the same way. It's going to open up a page. I didn't snip the entire page, but in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see an icon that looks like this, and it's that gray box. When you select, it says, go to the practice test site. So this will get you to the same place where I'm about to take you, in the same place if we were to click on the link there in that access to CAASPP practice test. But I would strongly encourage you to do it with the Chromebook and do this, because that's exactly how the students will do it when they go there. So I will thank you very much for sharing that. Just some other things here, your resources that can help you with those questions, but the key thing is how you get access. So I'm going to share my screen now. And when I click on that, I will, yeah, thumbs up here. You guys should now be looking at, if you were to have clicked on that link, and although you're welcome to do that if you're following along with this, that will take you away from perhaps the webinar. So you may not be able to see some of the things I'm referring to. It'd probably be more beneficial if you maybe spent that time away from this webinar to do that. So when you get to the screen, this is the first screen that you get to. Since you don't necessarily have a login to get in there, you're going to ignore all that. You're just going to leave the default settings for most of the stuff. You're going to access it from home as being a guest user and doing a guest session. When students are in class, when Miss Anna had referred to ways that they would actually sign in, but you don't need to worry about that for the purposes of what we're doing right now. That's something that the teachers are helping them practice and such, where they actually put in usernames and test session codes and things. So for now, you're just going to leave the default here as guest user is on and guest session is on. You can run diagnostics if things are falling apart, but since again, you're using the district provided Chromebook, it should work just fine. If there's any issues with that Chromebook, please, when you take it back to your class, let the classroom teacher know, so that way they can get that exchanged for a working device. They have them available at the sites for that purpose. And we definitely don't want them to have challenges on the day of the test. So at this point, you would go ahead and just simply say sign in. This will take them, redirect them to some choices here. So you're going to select the grade, and I'm just going to pick 4th grade because I taught 4th grade for 9 years and I like 4th grade. You will notice you don't want to be too overwhelmed here. There's a lot going on here. Again, Ms. Anna had alluded to the fact that there are a lot of tests that fall under that umbrella of CAASPP. The ones that you are going to be dealing with primarily will be these ones in the very top portion here. There are others that are on here, the training tests. We're not doing that, as we alluded, because that's where they do in the class. This is just the practice tests. Just quickly, so you're aware of what they are, to kind of give you a visual. If you have a kiddo that has perhaps an IEP or accommodations, there may be written into that IEP something in regards to state testing, which may apply, be having an alternative assessment. So you being parents that maybe are aware, you should be aware of this. If you're not sure if you have an IEP, inquire with the classroom teacher, your special ed team, and ask if there's any appropriate accommodations, and they would let you know. In which case, if it fits, then you may want to do the alternative assessment, because it will more closely parallel your child's experience during that time. Then you have a Spanish assessment. Again, if they're in that dual immersion program, they're doing Spanish, do it. Do not pick this if perhaps your child speaks Spanish. You go, oh, that's great, they can take the state test in Spanish. That is not the case. If they're in a general ed classroom, it will be provided to them in English. It's only if it's a Spanish type of setting. And then there are the LPAC is for assessing second language learners. So in summary, you just want to go to the top. Keep it simple. You're going to be up in here. I'll start off briefly with the performance test. The purpose of what I want to do here is just kind of see, this will look like what it looks like on those tests. When your child actually goes into it, they won't be messing with these settings because they will be set up for them uniquely when they log into the state test. However, for the practice test, the state does a really good job of allowing you the option to attempt to cater this practice test to meet any accommodations that may have been provided for your child. For the majority of the students taking the CAASPP, it will be the default. So unless you know for certain that you have accommodations, I would strongly encourage you not to toggle any of these, because then you may have a misunderstanding of how the test is going to work for them. For example, audio transcriptions. That just by you turning on the practice test, that doesn't mean it's going to happen when they take it, unless there's an accommodation for that. Presentation in English and Spanish, another example. Again, all of these. So assistive technology, all of those things, magnification. I'll explain what some of these tools may do, but just keep it as default. It's probably going to work best. So I usually just go ahead and go with that. And I say select. At this point, this basically just tests to make sure that you can hear things. It's a mic check. And you would play this, down goes, and then it said, can I do it or could I not? If not, troubleshoot. But in this case, I heard it, it's good. Again, on this screen, you just leave it as your defaults and say begin testing now. This will allow you to change those settings on the previous one. The help guide could be useful, but I'll be showing you some of that as we go through. So again, this one here is what's called a performance task, 4th grade ELA. The general format of this is the way performance tasks is these are designed to go over a long period of time, super long, a couple of days at least. It's not a simple question. There's a lot of reading that's involved in these. So I'm going to show you some of the tools that are on here. So you'll see that I expanded the reading selection by clicking this right arrow. That's expanding things, and I can collapse it down. I also have what's called these little, I'll start with the top. There's called the global tools. These are the ones that will always be at the top up here. Next advances it to the next question. Save, if maybe you're in the middle of something, you click it, you're typing away, and you're like, oh, what if something goes on? Click save. Although it does automatically save questions when you proceed to the next one automatically, still always a good habit to save. And a pause, that's only done when there's a very specific window of time you're allowed for a pause. For these particular ones, it's got more flexibility, but a good general rule of thumb, and the teachers will instruct the students on this, if they have a bathroom break or go out for recess, the test can be paused for up to 20 minutes without having disruption, but the teachers will handle that. So don't worry too much about that, but that's what the students, that's what they would use that for. Over here is a little embedded screen where they can actually type notes. So if they wanted to take notes on their reading and put down some things or outline, they can do that. But it's very important that you let your kids know that whatever they type here is not the answer to their test. And another very important thing is what you type here, you cannot cut and paste. So if I were to write my whole response here, and I spent all this time in my notes, I said, perfect, I'm ready to go. And I highlight this and I do my infamous Control-C or copy, and I go, perfect, it's good, and also you want to save it. And if I go over here and click in here and attempt to paste it, nothing. That will not work. Very important tip. If you're going to give an answer, you do it in the correct box, okay? Where you want to do that. So that's another useful tool. This is something that is allowed for all students. It's called a line reader. This is useful. You'll notice that student directions on the left. I'll expand this. So I'm going to hit line reader. You know it's active because now it's kind of orange, and it highlighted the first line. When you're here to it basically kind of helps you to read, keep track of where you left off. You use the arrow keys for this. So as I'm reading through, I'm kind of going down and reading it. It does not do text to speech unless there's an accommodation in place. So don't expect to read it to you, but it does help you. So that's a good tool. You can zoom in, you can zoom out for some visual assistance. So that's kind of nice too. And get back to your notes. Those are the global tools at the top. You've already seen the expand tools. Off to the side, these little circles with down arrows, these are what are called contextual tools. Means it's going to give you some options based on what you're working with. So here, and they're usually pretty limited. So when I click here, it says highlight selection. And I notice it's grayed out because I haven't selected anything. So you can, so this is again, things that you want to kind of teach your kid if they're good at highlighting their first sentence in the task, so they want to have a detail, you must select it first, then you can highlight it and you can pick your color. So these are the types of things you probably want to practice, right? So at any rate, you go through, you're reading your things, you're using your tools. Over here, you'll notice some tools as well. Describing these two, you will see these on every test question in CAASPP, whether it's this particular performance task or it's this quick response. There's a tutorial and there's a mark for review. I'll start with a mark for review because this is kind of helpful. If your kiddo's ever getting on a question like, whoa, I'm not really sure I want to come back to it, you want to flag it. Because what that does is it kind of put a little fold in this question. And later on, you'll see it actually reminds them to go back and say, hey, you flagged that to check it. And that may mean that they just said, I don't know the answer and I'm going to guess right now, but I'm going to go back when I have more time and reevaluate. So they mark it for review and maybe they change it. That's what that does. And you'll see that here in a second. Another thing is the tutorial. Again, when you're kind of sitting down with your kiddo and kind of going through this, I'd recommend that when you see these different answer types, if you click on it, it'll teach you these tools that I'm describing. So what it does is it just shows a very simple animation that describes what this text box is and how you would fill it in. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's pretty obvious, but basically it says, yep, go here, you can go here, and you start typing there. That's basically says how to use this text box. That's pretty obvious, so I'm just going to say, yes, that's my answer. I'm going to move on. This is, again, the tool would be different. It says, like, how do I actually check and uncheck boxes? So that's another thing. So if in doubt and they don't know how to use the tools, at least show them how to use this trick, because it'll tell them. It'll tell them how to use the tool. So again, I'm just going to sort of just guess here like that, and I'm going to move on. Okay, so the performance task is going to be a very, very small sample of what they would typically do. I'm just going to kind of move through just to show you how it ends here. So here, this is when they're formally doing it, the big thing. The other one was pre-planning. This is the big thing. I'm going to say all done. I'm sure that your kids will do much better than I did on this one. And I'm going to say next. And now you'll notice this is, hey, you've reached the end. Okay, cool. So when I click end test, you say you can continue working. Click no to continue or yes to move on. So you'll notice here, it has my questions that I did. You'll notice I have a flag. That's the reminder. Hey, you said to take a look at this. So slow down and go, oh, what was that about? I forgot. Not such a big deal on this one because there's only a few questions they'll deal with, but on that, the short response or like the multiple choice portions, they may have, say, 40, 50 questions for all you know, and they'll forget that they checked number 2. So this helps remind them, hey, I checked it, and all I need to do is click it, and it'll bring them back to that. And they go like, oh, what was that thing? Oh yeah, I forgot. I didn't finish writing this, because the way this test is designed, if I were to leave this blank, it won't actually let me, it won't check it. Sometimes you'll be stuck there. Like you have to do something. So that's a way you can kind of like come back to things. Okay. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this one. I want to show you some multiple choice and more specifically math. Say, yeah, see right there, it said you have to answer all the questions. So I'll just say yes. Done. Okay. So that's done. And then whatever, you could save it as you go, but that's fine. Say yes, and I'm out. Okay. All right. And then when you submit it, this is what they would do. If you're not going to get answers to this, unfortunately, for the practice test. So you kind of, you know, it just basically says, yeah, you did it. Congratulations. So you can't really use this as a measure of again, it's just familiarization with the tools. So I'm going to go through really quick, and I'm going to show you the responses, and specifically with math. I'm intentionally picking a higher grade level because there are some tools that are more available here that are not available in the lower grades based on the content. That I just wanted to see if I could show you a few of those. So again, this is the math practice test. Performance is the long thing. Practice is the short answers. And then again, I'm going to pick defaults on this. And I have to do this. I can't skip it. I have to hit play. Yourself that it works. Okay, cool, it works. At least it's quick though, so that's nice. I'm good here. I'm going to keep these defaults also in place, and then it will begin this test as well. Okay, so some of the things here you'll notice, you do have those universal tools at the top, still has that line reader. There will, depending on the question, maybe be some different tools here. This is a way where the students all have touch screen on their Chromebook. They can enter their responses to these to the answers by touching on the screen. They can use their trackpad and select the answers. Don't judge me. I'm not going to attempt to answer these right now. It is 8th grade, and I'm crushed for time. So pretend I'm a genius and these are all right. Just bear with me. I know they're wrong. So I'm going to say 25, okay? Because if I don't do that, it won't let me go to the next question. So I go there. This is a good example. So here's a tool where they have to graph something, okay? So you'll notice up here, I need to respond by interacting with this. So you'll notice there's some options here. I can delete something, or it says add an arrow, okay? So when I click on add an arrow, and if I'm not sure how to use this tool, again, remember our quick tip, go over here, go to the tutorial. It'll literally go through, and I'll just drag it fast. I'm going to show you how you drag things, how you move things, how you put dots in, how you draw lines, but I'm going to show you. Okay, so for this one, I need to add an arrow. So if I was answering my question, I'd click on the box, and I would say, I'm going to, that's my answer. Okay, one of the things you want them to be very clear on is this will let you put an arrow just about anywhere. So you have to make sure that they put the answer in the appropriate spot. So again, have them practice, watch where they put it, right? Another thing I wanted to, I'm going to get it on a multiple choice. So I answered it so I could advance. These are those check boxes. I'm just going to pick 2. I'm going to see if it'll let me go. Yep, good. What I want to do, this is kind of cool. So this is a multiple choice. So another tool that's available in here, which I really like, is sometimes you're like, I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I know it's not that one. So they have a tool that's available that's called a strike through. And that's basically you digitally saying, yeah, it's not D. Okay. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can click this, which allows you to pick which one you would like to strike through. So I'm like, yep, it's definitely not that one. Or if you have that deselected, let me turn that off. See, now I'm back to my normal because no longer strike through. If they right click, and on a Chromebook, it's a little tricky. If they don't know the trick, it's 2 fingers spread apart and tapping it. They can right click and they can strike through. But that's another tool that's helpful as well. Striking through, eliminating choices, okay? And again, that's here. Notepad is still there if you want to make notes to yourself. And again, mark for review is always present on every question, so you can come back to it. One other thing I wanted to show you. So I tried to answer all your questions. I guess, oh, I didn't. Well, that was actually a good example. I didn't actually answer the question, so it didn't let me go. And this is how it happens. If I decide like, yeah, I'm not really sure, I want to come back to that, you might want to demonstrate that it won't let you. It needs you to do something. And so what you need to kind of teach them, it's like, hey, it's okay to move forward, but this is an important lesson. You don't want to get so hung up on a certain question that you don't ever finish any of the rest of the test, but you would have to demonstrate to them that they need to do something and then encourage them to mark it for review. Maybe put a notepad to say like, you know, I just guessed, make sure to do this one over so they can go and look at their notes. I don't know, but whatever strategies work for your kiddos. So now they know they have to come back at this, okay? And now I can go to the next question. So that's a very common thing. They get hung up and they're like, I'm not sure, how do I go ahead? Because I do that a lot of times just on written tests. I get hung up on something, I move ahead and I come back. So that's a strategy for that. Okay. The calculator can be a little interesting. It's kind of down here and they use these tools here in multiplication. They can do fractions. Again, I would just encourage you to look at the tutorial. It'll show you. But one of the things to remember is the arrow keys are your friend on the CAASPP test, because now it's like, that's the active thing. I can click here, but if I use the arrow keys, it's actually a lot easier to move around. So if I want to put it here and I go 1 and I go, if I try to go, oh, how do I get it down to do the half? It's like, if I put a 2 here, that's now a 12, because that's what the computer wants. No, just use the down arrow and then do it there. And now if I want to move the cursor, say, oh, I wanted the 2 on the right side or an X, I use the right arrow. So little tips that might help you kind of get there. So maybe it's something like this, right? You can use the cursor to get to places, but I oftentimes find that when you're dealing with things like these types of equations, you can kind of get lost in what it's really doing. So I use the arrow keys, a lot easier. Okay. I think we're pretty good here on those. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, no past tutorial. Zoom in, zoom out. I was hoping to get to one where there is for certain tests where one of your universal tools at the top, depending on the grade level, I think it's 6th, 7th, and 8th, and based on the question, you'll have a calculator up here. Not common, but if you're doing things like if you need some sort of a graphing calculator or something where you need a cosine sine, not as common in K8, obviously, but if the question allows for calculators, there will be a calculator icon. You click it and it comes up kind of like similar to the one that we had seen before, but you just kind of have to teach them how to do it. I'm not going to waste our time digging around trying to find one too much. I'll try one more. No, yeah, I was really hoping to get there. Okay, anyway, trust me, there's a calculator there. At that point, let's see, so we've got ELA. Yeah, again, my main goal here was just to familiarize you with the tools, okay? This is your format. This is exactly how it'll look. Pay close attention, teach them. Don't be too concerned. You're not going to lose your stuff. Just go to your next question, save it if you're concerned. Things like that. Take advantage of some of the things that they give you. It may help you out to kind of focus your attention on things like the line reader, zoom in and out. If you're not sure, go here. And if in doubt, just go to the tutorial because it'll at least remind you how to draw that line. Don't sit there for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to draw a line. Use your finger and that it won't work, okay? All right. So, and another thing, when you're doing the practice test, don't feel like you have to go through it to end it. If you do hit the pause button, it will stop the test in our environment, because we're just guests. In the actual environment in the classroom, it will actually pause and they can come back. But for the purposes of this, it'll basically bring you all the way out. Okay. I think I pretty much covered most of it. We do have some time here, actually a bit of it, where by the time we end, if you have specific questions or anything or concerns, we will have at least the next 15 minutes to discuss that. But we do have another slide here. I'm going to stop sharing that Mr. Herman, I believe, will be sharing with us.
Yep. So these were just some best practices for you to help your child do their best. Because remember, that's what we're hoping for, is just for them to do their best. One thing is, as Bruce was showing, do the practice test. Your child becomes familiar with the question types, the different tools, what to expect during the test, especially because, like we said, a third of our students have not ever seen this test before. So that's something to think about and look at. Another thing is the night before each test, just make sure that the Chromebook is fully charged, plug it in overnight. If there's any problems that you've been having with the Chromebook, like if there's missing keys or it behaves funny or something like that, make sure to let your teacher or school know, and they will be able to get you a replacement device. So make sure that's taken care of before testing occurs, or as soon as possible if it's happening during testing. The other thing is, just encourage your kids to do their best. Help to build confidence in them. You can give them a note in their lunch or something, or in the morning that says, "Hey, I believe in you." You can go ahead and it doesn't matter how you do. It's that we just want you to do your best. That type of thing. So any ways that you can encourage them and help them to feel like they are able to do this, that's going to help them a lot to have the confidence to be able to do well on the test. Know your child's testing schedule. The school sites, the principals most likely will be sending out parent square messages, if they haven't already, about what the schedule will look like and what time of day it will be, things along those lines. So they can go ahead and you can go ahead and look at those particular schedules to determine, what days is there going to be testing, what time of day is it going to be, that type of thing. One thing, as most of us know, we perform our best when we have a good night's sleep, when we've eaten something. Food is fuel, and our brains use a lot of fuel. So it's always good to be able to have a good breakfast in the morning so that they have enough fuel to be able to do the test well. And movement as well. Exercise helps our brains to function. And so, it might be a good idea that the day before the test to go on a walk as a family or something like that, and that way you can get the blood pumping, get your kids' brains active, that type of thing. If you wake up early in the morning, you can do that in the morning as well. So those are just some tips that we can give to you of what you can do to be able to help your child do the best that they can. And then the last thing is, if you do have any other questions, we're going to have some questions here that we can answer as well. But if after this meeting you have questions, or if you're watching the recording of this, then you can always email us at edtech@ogsd.net. And we will be able to either try and answer your questions or direct you to the people that would be able to answer your questions. Okay, and I see there's one question already on there.
And I was going to just direct you. We have one question already that any one of you can answer. But if you don't know, you can type your questions in the chat, or if you raise your hand, we can hit the button to allow you to speak. If you want to, if you prefer to just say it out loud, that's fine too. And
Yes.
by raising your hand, there's a little button on the bottom to raise hand, because we can't see you right now.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Roca family. The question was, do you know if teachers will allow students to bring home their laptops prior to testing? This is an excellent question. I can speak towards the fact that it is a board approved situation here with it. Your child is provided a Chromebook. Okay. I know that based on the grade level, I've seen different interpretations on how and when that device may come home. The best way I can answer this for you would be to just contact the teacher. You know, this specific environment here, they're the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth graders. I would imagine that should be okay, but maybe there's something happening there. And maybe just they haven't really thought that through as to how to do that. So if you interact with the teacher, that would probably be the best place to start. And if you have any concerns, especially if at home you don't have access to be able to do this and you really want to, practice with your child and say, I want to set them up for success. And if you come at it from that perspective, when I was teaching fourth grade, if anybody said to me, I would be like, yeah, usually I would try to keep them safe here because the kiddos like, they're out playing and I'm afraid something's going to happen, but that totally makes sense. Let's schedule a time and we'll make sure it makes it home. So that way you're both on the same page. But again, your teacher can speak directly towards that.
Okay, we'll stay on for any other questions. You can type into the chat. You can, thank you so much. Yeah, you can type into the chat or we can unmute you and you can ask live. I hope you found this information helpful. I know there's a lot to it, but what we went over is really, I think those are the best strategies to help your child be prepared. And of course, we want them to do their best without the additional anxiety of the testing environment. So just being prepared and knowing what to expect is kind of the best strategy right now. This presentation was recorded. It's being recorded. We'll upload the recording to YouTube. Our intent was to stream it live, but that function didn't happen for us tonight. So we will upload it as soon as possible, and it can be viewed in a preferred language through closed captioning. Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate your participation, and if you have any questions, feel free to stay on, but we'll go ahead and say goodbye, and feel free to email with any questions that you might have at a later time. Thank you, guys.